Hey guys, tonight we drift into the world of pirates. Not the romanticized ones with parrots and polished cutlasses just yet, but the raw beginnings of sea raiding. The ancient waves where men first looked at the horizon and thought, what if I take what's not mine and vanish across the water? The salt air clings to your skin, a soft sting at the edge of your lips. You hear the creak of boats stitched together with reeds and planks, the faint lap of oars in the dusk. Somewhere in the dark, a torch flares, and your gut reminds you, you wouldn't last 5 minutes here. These raiders do not knock. They come for grain, for bronze, for people. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love for you to comment your location and the local time where you are listening right now, because somewhere, someone might be drifting to sleep under their own stormy sky. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story begins in shadows so old, they feel more myth than history. You are standing along the shores of the eastern Mediterranean, somewhere around 1200 BCE, when the great powers, Egypt, the Hittites, Mycenaean Greece, are all beginning to falter. Into this vacuum sail the mysterious sea peoples. Historians still debate who exactly they were. Some say they were displaced groups from the Aegean. Others suggest they came from as far as Sicily or Anatolia. They appear in Egyptian records like storm clouds, described as marauders who came not just with swords, but with entire families packed into ships, sweeping the coastline, plundering towns, and sometimes staying to build new lives. Imagine the terror of spotting their sails in the distance. You don't know if they're coming to trade or to burn your village to the ground. This uncertainty is the cradle of piracy. The sea allows men to appear and vanish without warning beyond the reach of land-bound armies. You can almost see a grain caravan in Cyprus waiting for its shipment of copper, only to learn that the ship has been seized. Instead of safe delivery, the goods are gone, melted into the hands of men who answer to no king. The Phoenicians, those brilliant traders who gave the world the alphabet, were both victims and participants in this early story. They sailed slender ships, packed with purple-dyed cloth and cedar, their merchants braving waters where pirates lurked. Yet some of their own seafarers may have dabbled in piracy when profit beckoned. It is difficult to draw clean lines in an age when one man's merchant was another man's raider. Even in Homer's Odyssey, written around the 8th century BCE, piracy is treated less like a crime and more like an occupation. When Odysseus is asked if he's a trader or pirate, the question is casual, like asking today if you are a carpenter or a farmer. You smile wryly. It was a different kind of job market back then. The quirky detail here is that some pirates carried helmets adorned with bird crests, perhaps pigeons or doves, meant to intimidate or to call upon divine favor. Imagine boarding a ship and staring into the eyes of a raider whose head is crowned with fluttering feathers. You try not to laugh, but when he raises his axe, the humor fades quickly. Such details, carved in reliefs or painted on pottery, remind you that the line between the bizarre and the deadly was razor thin. In the Aegean, pirates raided islands like locusts. Small communities clung to rocky outcrops, constantly fearing a knock at the door, or more likely, a torch at the roof. Some historians argue that entire villages migrated inland, away from the shore, just to avoid raids. Archaeology supports this. In certain periods, coastal settlements vanish, only to be replaced by hilltop fortresses a few miles inland. Why live by the water if the water brings danger? It is as if the sea itself had become a highway of menace. You walk the markets of ancient Greece, perhaps Athens in its early centuries, and you overhear whispers of ships that disappear on the route to Asia Minor. Families wait for loved ones who never return. and everyone suspects the same culprits. Pirates who swoop down, seize goods, and sell captives into slavery. Piracy feeds the ancient slave markets. You can picture a chained line of men and women in some bustling port, the salt still drying on their skin, sold to labor in mines or fields. But here's the uncertainty. Were all these so-called pirates truly independent? Some evidence suggests that powerful states may have quietly sponsored them, using pirates as deniable tools to harass rivals. A king could claim clean hands while his hired raiders disrupted another kingdom's supply lines. It's a shadow game, one historians still debate. Were those sea peoples desperate refugees or weapons in the hands of a hidden power? No one can say for certain. As you drift further into the centuries, you feel the pattern repeating. In the Black Sea, Greek colonists encounter tribes who sometimes trade, sometimes raid. The line is always thin. A ship leaving Miletus with amphorae of olive oil might arrive safely, or might never arrive at all. The sea is both bridge and trap, and every captain knows the risk. You run your hand along the edge of a weathered amphora, imagining the silent prayer uttered before it was loaded. May the gods grant us safe passage. And yet, despite the fear, piracy helps shape civilizations. Coastal communities learn to build walls, watchtowers, and navies. Athens develops its naval power in part to secure trade routes. Rhodes grows rich by enforcing anti-piracy laws in the Hellenistic era, even setting up an international maritime code. Without pirates, perhaps the seas would never have been so carefully policed. Danger begets innovation, and piracy is the whetstone on which seafaring nations sharpen their blades. You close your eyes and hear the faint lapping of water on the hull. Somewhere, a lookout calls softly. A sail on the horizon. Is it a trader or a raider? You can't tell. That uncertainty, haunting possibility, is the heartbeat of ancient piracy. And here, on these ancient waves, you sense the beginning of a long story. Pirates will never truly vanish. They will only change names, flags, and sails. The pigeon helmet may fade, but another symbol will take its place. The sea remembers them all. And tonight, so do you. You move forward in time, your feet brushing sand that has already seen 1,000 storms, until you reach the height of the Mediterranean world. The Romans have risen, their legions spreading across continents, their grain ships feeding a city of 1 million mouths. Rome depends on the sea now, on cargoes from Sicily, Egypt, and North Africa. And where there is dependence, there is vulnerability. You stand on a wharf in Ostia, the Roman port, and watch the sails come in. Some ships are battered, their crew nervous. Some never arrive at all. The problem is pirates, and for Rome, it becomes an existential threat. Imagine the city's granaries emptying, bread lines growing longer, the restless poor turning angry. A Roman senator looks across the Senate House, sweat on his brow, knowing that the empire could choke not from a barbarian horde, but from a handful of raiders in fast galleys. These pirates are not ragtag bands in this age. They are organized, wealthy, and brazen. By the 1st century BCE, they dominate the Mediterranean, especially from strongholds in Cilicia, rocky southern Anatolia, a coast riddled with coves and caves perfect for hiding ships. You climb up those cliffs in your mind and look down. The sea is a highway for escape, and behind you, narrow paths lead to hidden fortresses. The pirate bases are nearly impregnable. The quirky detail that makes you smile is this. Roman accounts describe pirates who didn't just rob, but staged theater. They sometimes mocked captured Roman officials by dressing them in ridiculous costumes before ransoming them. You can picture a stern senator forced to wear clownish robes while the pirates laugh, drinking their stolen wine. Pirates understood humiliation as another weapon. It broke morale and increased their bargaining power. But Rome's loss was also personal. One of the most famous pirate encounters involves a young Julius Caesar. Around 75 BCE, traveling across the Aegean, Caesar is captured by Cilician pirates. They demand a ransom of 20 talents of silver. Caesar, insulted, insists they raise the ransom to 50 talents, because clearly he is worth more. He spends over a month in their camp, reading poetry to them, joking that once he is free, he will return and crucify them all. The pirates laugh. When the ransom is paid and Caesar is released, he raises a fleet, hunts them down, makes good on his promise. True to Roman efficiency, he crucifies them. But first, in a rare gesture of mercy, he orders their throats cut so their suffering is less. You exhale softly. Even Roman mercy comes wrapped in steel. This is the scholarly uncertainty. How widespread exactly were these pirate kingdoms? Ancient writers may have exaggerated their scale to highlight Rome's later triumphs. Some modern historians suggest that while Cilicia was a hot spot, the pirates were scattered rather than unified, and that the idea of a massive pirate empire was partly propaganda. Still, the effect was real. Rome could not tolerate such disruption, and so comes Pompey the Great. In 67 BCE, the Senate grants him extraordinary command through the Lex Gabinia. His task: clear the seas of pirates. Imagine the scope. He is given control of the entire Mediterranean and its coasts up to 50 miles inland. For a moment, the map belongs to him. You sail with his fleet, the prows cutting water in a coordinated sweep. Instead of chasing endlessly, Pompey divides the sea into sectors, assigns commanders, and drives the pirates into a corner. Within 3 months, the threat that had haunted Rome for decades is broken. Pompey captures or kills thousands, and here is another strange twist. He resettles many pirates inland, offering them farms. Rather than slaughter all, he gives some a new life on land, away from temptation. You can picture a former pirate, once proud on the deck of a galley, now bent over a plow, grumbling at the soil. Perhaps piracy had been more exciting, but at least the risk of crucifixion is gone. The result is peace at sea for a while. Roman grain fleets flow safely again, the city's bellies filled. Yet pirates never vanish completely. You wander along the North African coast and hear of Berber raiders, or out into the Adriatic, where Illyrians had long preyed on shipping. Even after Pompey's victory, piracy is like a weed. Cut it back, and it grows in another patch of neglected earth. You pause to imagine the Roman sailor himself, not the senator or the general, but the man pulling at oars, squinting into the horizon. He knows the signs. Sudden sails appearing from behind a headland, the glint of bronze weapons, the shouted commands in foreign tongues. For him, piracy is not a headline, but a heartbeat of fear. You wonder how many prayers rose from those decks, whispered to Neptune, Fortuna, or any god who might listen. In this world, piracy is both threat and mirror. The empire that rules the land still struggles to master the sea, and its solution, military might, overwhelming organization, becomes a model repeated through history. To control trade, control the water. To defeat raiders, outnumber and outlast them. But as you stand on the Roman shore at sunset, the waves soft against stone, you sense the truth. Pirates are not gone. They never are. They wait for the cracks, the moments of weakness. And when empires falter, they return like gulls to a discarded net. You turn from Rome's glow, already hearing in the wind another sound. The creak of ships, not from the Mediterranean, but from colder, northern waters. Their sails are square, their prows carved like dragons. The age of Rome is fading, but another tide is coming. The air grows sharper, salt mixed with the chill of northern winds. You stand at the edge of a fjord, the water black and cold, the cliffs rising steep as fortress walls. From the mist emerges a longship, lean, swift, its prow carved into the snarling head of a dragon. You hear the oars dip in unison, the thud of shields along the gunwales. This is not the Mediterranean of Pompey and Caesar anymore. You are in the age of the Vikings, when the northern seas themselves became highways of raid and trade, when piracy blurred with exploration, and when whole coastlines trembled at the sight of a single striped sail. The first shock of Viking raids came in 793 CE at the monastery of Lindisfarne, off the coast of Northumbria. You can imagine the scene. Monks chanting in the candlelit chapel, the sudden pounding of boots, the roar of warriors breaking through the door. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records it as harrowing inroads of heathen men. They slaughtered, plundered, carried off gold, silver, and captives. To contemporaries, it felt apocalyptic. How could God allow such desecration? You almost taste the fear in the parchment ink, the trembling hands that wrote those words. This is the first great Viking raid recorded, and it would not be the last. The quirky detail here is that not every Viking ship sailed only for war. Some longships carried livestock, cows, sheep, goats, wedged into corners beside barrels of ale and salted fish. Imagine being captured by pirates and realizing your captor's ship also smells like a barnyard. Piracy and colonization were often intertwined. A crew might raid a village, but just as easily they might settle, bringing their families, livestock, and tools. The same ship could be a war galley one season and a floating farmstead the next. And here is the scholarly uncertainty. Were the Vikings pirates in the sense we imagine? Or were they more like seasonal raiders with complex motives? Some historians argue that piracy is too simplistic, that many raids were a form of proto-politics, securing wealth, tribute, and reputation. Others suggest that the distinction between pirate and legitimate warrior was meaningless to them. To the victims, of course, it made no difference. To be raided was to lose. You stand on the deck now, the sails swelling above you. The longship cuts swiftly across open water. These ships are masterpieces, shallow draft, allowing them to slip up rivers as easily as they sail the sea. You feel the uncanny shift. One moment to the coast of France, the next the Seine itself, Paris trembling behind its walls. In 845, Viking raiders led by Ragnar, perhaps more legend than man, rode straight into the heart of Paris. The city was forced to pay a ransom of 7,000 pounds of silver to make them leave. Imagine carts of coin and ingots clattering down cobblestones. The townspeople watching their wealth vanish into northern hands. And yet, piracy was not just violence. It spurred responses. Fortified bridges were built across rivers to block ships. Towns raised walls, kings raised armies. Even language shifts. The word Viking itself may come from Vik, meaning bay or inlet, the places from which raiders launched. To go Viking was not just an identity, but an activity. Something you did, like fishing or farming. Tonight, you are not just a listener. You are a participant. You are going Viking each time you step aboard this ship. The Viking world is wide. You follow them west to the British Isles, where monasteries and towns grow used to the cycle of raids. Then to Ireland, where Dublin itself begins as a Viking settlement. You trace their path further, to Iceland, Greenland, even across the Atlantic to Vinland, what we now call Newfoundland in Canada. Are these pirates, you wonder, or explorers? The sea does not answer. It accepts both. A memory lingers of the Mediterranean too, for the Vikings did not ignore it. By the 9th century, they are in Spain, raiding Muslim and Christian alike, even reaching Italy. In 859, a fleet of Viking ships sails through the Strait of Gibraltar, plundering the coasts of North Africa and striking as far as Pisa. Imagine a farmer in Tuscany watching strange northern ships glide up, dragon-headed, sails bright against the sun. The Vikings are everywhere, both feared and admired for their daring. Quirky tales follow them. One story tells of a Viking leader who captured a city and demanded tribute. When the townspeople refused, he asked only for a ransom, as much land as could be covered by a single ox hide. Relieved, they agreed. The Vikings then cut the ox hide into strips so fine they stretched it around the entire citadel, claiming it as their prize. Trickery, you realize, was as powerful a weapon as the axe. And yet, over time, Viking raiding fades into settlement. By the 11th century, Normandy in France is given to Viking descendants, the Northmen, in exchange for peace. These Normans, once raiders, will later launch their own conquests, from England to Sicily. Piracy has a long echo, reshaping kingdoms long after the raids stop. You feel history folding in on itself, one raid birthing another, each wave rolling forward. But here's the part that lulls you deeper. The sea is never truly conquered. The Vikings themselves become targets. As Christian kingdoms consolidate, as navies grow stronger, the dragon prows vanish from rivers, the sails lower. You can still hear the faint beat of their oars, but only in legend, in sagas told by firelight. Were they pirates? Were they pioneers? Perhaps both. Perhaps always both. The tide pulls you away now, away from the fjords, and into another sea altogether. Eastward, the waters grow warmer, the coasts more crowded. The sails you see here are smaller, but the terror they inspire is just as real. They belong to another set of raiders. Different lands, different flags, but the same hunger. They are the Wokou, the pirates of Asia, waiting in the haze of a new dawn. The sea warms as you drift eastward, the salt air tinged with spices, tea leaves, and the faint smoke of coastal fires. You are in the waters of East Asia now, where archipelagos stitch together long chains of islands, and crowded ports hum with trade. But lurking among the bustling roots of the South China Sea and the East China Sea, another set of shadows rises. These are the Wokou, the pirates who haunted the coasts of China and Korea for centuries. Their sails sharp against the horizon like blades waiting in silence. The first accounts of the Wokou date back to the 13th century, though their roots might reach even earlier. You hear their name in Mandarin, Wokou, literally dwarf pirates, a term not meant kindly, but spat from the mouths of terrified villagers who saw their smoke-darkened sails approach. For generations, the stereotype held that these pirates were Japanese. Indeed, many were. Impoverished fishermen, ronin without masters, men who looked at the rice fields and found them empty, but looked to the sea and found it full of opportunities. Yet, historians today argue that the Wokou were rarely pure in origin. By the 14th and 15th centuries, many were a blend of peoples, Japanese, Chinese smugglers, even Portuguese adventurers, who together formed bands that struck quickly, vanishing back to island hideouts before imperial navies could respond. You walk a sandy Chinese beach in your imagination, perhaps in Zhejiang province around the 1550s. The villagers know the sound already, the sudden beating of oars, the shouts in foreign tongues, the thud of boots on shore. They scatter, clutching children, while smoke rises from burning granaries. To be raided meant not only the loss of goods, but the possibility of being dragged away. sold in some distant port as slave or concubine. The sea that promised wealth through trade became, in the eyes of many, a corridor of dread. And here's the quirky detail. Wokou pirates sometimes carried percussion instruments, drums and gongs, not just for celebration, but to terrify. Imagine being a farmer in your field, hearing the sudden pounding of drums from offshore. It isn't a festival. It's the soundtrack of ruin. Sound carried across the water long before sails appeared, turning every heartbeat into dread. Pirates knew that fear was as useful a weapon as steel. Scholarly uncertainty lingers here. Were the Wokou truly outsiders, or were they, in fact, locals disguising themselves? Some modern historians suggest that many so-called pirate attacks were carried out by Chinese smugglers frustrated with strict Ming Dynasty maritime bans. In official records, it was easier to blame foreign raiders than to admit that discontent boiled within the empire itself. You smile wryly at the thought. What if the pirates haunting the coast were sometimes your neighbors? Men who by day fished beside you, but by night donned another name and raised another flag. The Ming government tried to respond. At times, they sent armies to burn pirate bases, storming coastal villages suspected of harboring them. Other times, they fortified their own shores, raising watchtowers, issuing fire signals along the coast. Yet the Wokou proved slippery. Strike one base, and another appeared. Try to blockade trade, and the pirates thrived even more, smuggling silk, salt, and silver outside official channels. You travel with them in your mind now, aboard a narrow, fast junk painted black for stealth. The crew is a mix. Scarred Japanese warriors, Chinese sailors familiar with hidden coves, perhaps even a European gunner who traded his allegiance for coin. The hold is cramped with stolen bolts of silk, barrels of rice, lacquered goods, and sometimes trembling captives. By day they hide among rocky islands, cooking fish in silence. By night they glide out, their oars muffled with rags, their targets chosen with care. The power of the Wokou peaked in the 16th century. Chinese records from the Jiajing Emperor's reign complain bitterly of coastal troubles, whole provinces impoverished by constant raids. One famous admiral, Qi Jiguang, rose to fame by fighting them, drilling peasant soldiers into disciplined troops, inventing new formations with long spears and swords. His manuals survive even today, filled with careful diagrams of how to resist the pirates' sudden charges. You picture him standing at dawn, scanning the horizon, teaching farmers to fight as one, his patience worn thin by years of coastal war. Yet the Wokou never disappeared overnight. Some were killed, some absorbed into local societies, some simply shifted identities from outlaw to trader as the winds of politics turned. The legacy of their raids left deep scars in the cultural memory of East Asia. Folk tales lingered, warning children of sails on the horizon. Even into the 20th century, the word Wokou carried sting in Chinese and Korean ears, a reminder of centuries when the sea offered not security, but sudden plunder. And still, as you lean against the rail of that imagined ship, you feel the paradox again. Pirates are parasites, yet they shape the world. Without them, defenses are not built. Heroes like Qi Jiguang do not rise, and smugglers do not sharpen their networks. The coastline itself evolves in response to fear. Villages grow walls, navies modernize, and trade routes adapt. Piracy is both destruction and dark catalyst. The sails around you vanish into mist now, and your ears ring with the fading echo of those drums. Another coast waits, another theater of piracy unfolding. This time, the waters are warmer still. The harbors filled with Ottoman ships, the mosques of North Africa gleaming white against the sun. Here, the pirates are called corsairs, and they carry not only blades, but blessings from sultans. You breathe deep and prepare yourself, for the Barbary coast awaits. The sea air shifts again, warmer, heavier, carrying scents of spices, oranges, and the faint resin of cedar. You drift southward into the great sweep of the Mediterranean once more. But this time, it is not Rome's story. Centuries have passed. The minarets of North Africa rise against a blue sky, their calls to prayer echoing across the harbors. In those harbors, sleek galleys rock on the tide, their decks crowded with oarsmen, their sails furled, their cannon primed. These are the corsairs of the Barbary coast, and they are about to define piracy for centuries. Barbary, that name itself comes from the Berbers, the people of North Africa. But by the 16th century, it refers to the whole sweep of Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli, and Morocco. From these ports, pirates sail under the crescent moon of Islam and the shadow of the Ottoman Empire. They are raiders, yes, but also state-sanctioned predators, often holding official commissions from sultans or beys. To the Europeans, they are a scourge, a nightmare that haunts every voyage from Gibraltar to Greece. To their own rulers, they are a weapon and a revenue stream, channeling captured wealth and enslaved bodies into coastal cities that thrive on piracy. Picture Algiers around 1600, a bustling port alive with markets selling spices, fabrics, weapons, and human beings. You walk the narrow streets, past mosques with elegant courtyards, past fortress walls bristling with cannon. At the docks, you see men hauled in chains, their heads bent low, freshly captured from European ships. They will be sold into slavery, some to row in the corsairs' galleys, others to labor in fields or houses. European estimates suggest that from the 16th to the 19th centuries, as many as 1 million Christians were enslaved in North Africa through corsair raids. That number is debated, but the memory of it echoes across centuries of fear and resentment. Here comes your quirky detail. Corsairs sometimes attacked not just ships, but whole coastal villages in Europe. Imagine a small fishing town in Ireland or Italy, waking to shouts in the night, torches along the beach. Within hours, dozens of people are gone, carried across the sea to Algiers or Tunis. The fear of such raids was so widespread that entire coastal stretches were abandoned or fortified with watchtowers. Even as far away as Iceland in 1627, corsairs struck, capturing nearly 400 people and selling them in North Africa. Imagine the bewilderment of Icelanders, plucked from their volcanic island and dropped into the sunlit, unfamiliar world of Algiers. It's a story so strange it feels like fiction, but it is carved into records. And yet, scholars debate the boundaries here. Were these men pirates in the true outlaw sense, or were they privateers in the employ of Ottoman rulers? The line blurs again. European states, after all, did the same, granting letters of marque to their own privateers. When the corsairs raided under orders, were they pirates or soldiers? Historians still argue. Perhaps, as always, it depended on who was telling the story. You stand on a corsair galley now. The air is heavy with sweat and salt. Below deck, chained oarsmen pull in rhythm, their backs slick with labor. Above, the captain shouts orders in Turkish or Arabic, his crew readying grappling hooks. Ahead lies a fat merchant ship, its sails straining under the weight of wool, wine, or grain. The corsairs close swiftly, their oars slicing the water. A cannon booms, smoke rolls, and the air is filled with splinters and shouts. Within minutes, the ship is theirs. Loot is hauled aboard, captives bound. The crew cheers, the spoils rich enough to keep them for months. European powers respond, but slowly, awkwardly. Treaties are signed, tributes paid. Nations like England, France, and later the United States actually pay the Barbary states for safe passage. It's humiliating but practical, cheaper than endless war. American history remembers the Barbary corsairs vividly, for the young United States fought its first overseas conflict against them in the early 1800s. The Marines march to the shores of Tripoli, as the anthem still sings, attacking pirate strongholds. But in the corsair era of the 16th and 17th centuries, the balance of power lies firmly with North Africa, and Algiers becomes notorious. The city is not only a corsair port, but a marketplace for ransom negotiations. Families in Europe scrape together fortunes to free loved ones. Religious orders, like the Trinitarians and Mercedarians, specialize in fundraising and redeeming captives. You picture a small Spanish village selling its sheep, its tools, even its church silver, just to bring home a handful of men carried off by the sea. The human cost is incalculable, yet, perversely, piracy fuels prosperity. The Barbary cities flourish. Wealth from raids builds mosques, fortifications, palaces. Captured European artisans are put to work, building fountains or crafting weapons. Algiers becomes a cosmopolitan city, vibrant with stolen labor and trade. The paradox of piracy sharpens. It destroys some lives while enriching others, an economic engine driven by suffering. You lean against the fortress wall of Tunis at sunset, the call to prayer echoing. Below you, ships prepare to sail, their hulls dark against the orange water. You feel the unease. To some, these men are patriots, warriors against Christian Europe. To others, they are monsters, thieves who carry innocent lives across the sea. The truth, as always, shifts with the tide, but time will turn again. The corsairs' dominance will wane, not immediately, but inevitably. European navies grow stronger. Trade routes shift. By the 19th century, bombardments and treaties crush the Barbary states, ending centuries of corsair rule. Still, the memory lingers like salt on the tongue. You carry it with you now as you sail onward into waters where piracy takes a new form, not outlawed, but legalized, wrapped in parchment and seals. These are the privateers, the pirates with papers, who will carry the game to oceans even larger than the Mediterranean. The sails stiffen again as you cross into new waters. Atlantic winds now, stronger, wilder, promising horizons that stretch farther than any Roman, Viking, or corsairs ever dreamed. The age you drift into is one of crowns and kings, of empires clawing at one another across oceans. And in the middle of it all, rise a peculiar breed of pirate, the privateer. Pirates with paperwork, raiders made respectable by signatures and seals. You stand in a dim candlelit chamber in London in the late 16th century. A quill scratches against parchment. A monarch, Elizabeth I, signs her name to a letter of marque. With that flourish, a man, say Francis Drake, is no longer an outlaw, but an instrument of state. The letter authorizes him to raid enemy ships, capture cargoes, and bring back treasure. Without it, he is a pirate, destined for the gallows. With it, he is a national hero, knighted for his trouble. The thinness of that line between pirate and patriot astonishes you. It all depends on which flag you fly and who you rob. The world now is drenched in silver and gold. The Spanish have conquered the Americas, sending treasure fleets across the Atlantic. Chests of silver from Potosi, gold from New Granada, emeralds, pearls, sugar, tobacco. You can almost feel the weight of those coins spilling from the holds of a galleon. For Spain, these fleets are lifelines. For privateers, they are opportunities beyond imagination. Here's the quirky detail. Privateers often ran their ships like joint stock companies. Investors, sometimes even noblemen, funded the voyage, hoping for a share of the plunder. You imagine a group of merchants sitting around a table, sipping wine, nodding seriously as they invest in what is, essentially, legalized robbery. It is piracy, but dressed up in ledgers and contracts. In a sense, the pirate ship is a floating corporation, its dividends measured in stolen silver, yet scholars still argue. How much difference was there really between a pirate and a privateer? Some privateers exceeded their commissions, attacking neutral ships or raiding indiscriminately. Others switched flags depending on who paid better. Francis Drake, celebrated in England, was denounced in Spain as El Drake, the dragon, a ruthless pirate who terrorized their colonies. The truth is slippery, like the sea itself. Was Drake a hero or a thief? Perhaps he was both. You step aboard his ship, the Golden Hind, its decks crowded with sailors. The year is 1577, and Drake is circumnavigating the globe. Along the way, he captures Spanish treasure ships, seizes ports, and accumulates a fortune so vast that upon his return, Elizabeth knights him on deck. His voyage inspires awe and dread in equal measure. For England, it is a triumph. For Spain, it is piracy writ large across the oceans, and Drake is not alone. Other privateers, John Hawkins, Martin Frobisher, Henry Morgan, prowl the seas. Morgan, in particular, embodies the blurred line. In the Caribbean, he leads raids so brutal they resemble wars. In 1671, he sacks Panama City with hundreds of men, marching across the isthmus, burning and looting. He becomes wealthy, feared, despised, and then, astonishingly, he is knighted and made lieutenant governor of Jamaica. You shake your head. Imagine robbing banks today and then being rewarded with political office. That was the world of privateers. You walk the bustling port of Port Royal, Jamaica, in the late 1600s. It is known as the wickedest city on earth. Taverns spill rum into the sand, brothels light their lanterns, and privateers swagger with pockets heavy from raids. Here, piracy and privateering blend seamlessly. Ships unload stolen goods, and governors take their cut. The city thrives on theft. And when the ground shakes in 1692, a massive earthquake sends much of Port Royal tumbling into the sea, as if the earth itself had judged its sins too heavy. Divers today still find taverns and bottles preserved beneath the water, a ghostly reminder of that vanished age. But privateering was not confined to the Caribbean. In the Atlantic, French corsairs from Saint-Malo, Dutch sea beggars, and English adventurers all preyed on Spanish shipping. The oceans were chessboards, and privateers were pawns and knights, moving at the will of their monarchs. For centuries, treaties and wars rose and fell, but the privateers persisted, slipping between legality and lawlessness like shadows between waves. Here lies another uncertainty. Did privateering truly benefit states in the long run? Or did it simply encourage piracy? Some historians argue that by legitimizing raiding, governments created cultures of lawlessness that later spiraled beyond their control. When wars ended, privateers often refused to retire, turning their skills and ships to outright piracy. The very states that once blessed them now hunted them. It was, in many ways, a bargain with the devil. You picture a weary sailor in 1700, his letter of marque expired, his pockets empty. Does he return home to poverty? Or does he keep sailing, raising a black flag instead of a royal one? You know the choice many made. The golden age of piracy is just beyond the horizon, and its roots lie here, in the blurred morality of privateering. The sun dips low as you leave Port Royal behind. Ahead, the Caribbean glitters with promise and peril. You hear laughter, the clink of bottles, the scratch of fiddles in a Nassau tavern. Blackbeard waits there, Calico Jack, and Bonnie. The age of state-sanctioned plunder is ending, and the age of true outlaw pirates is about to begin. The wind smells heavier now. Molasses, tobacco, sweat, and something metallic like coins freshly minted. You've crossed into the glittering waters of the Caribbean at its most dangerous moment, the great highway of the Spanish treasure fleets. Here, the sea itself feels like a vault, heavy with silver and gold flowing from the Americas to Spain. And yet, no vault is ever truly secure. Picture the route. From Veracruz and Cartagena, galleons laden with silver bars, gold coins, emeralds, and pearls gather in Havana, waiting to sail in convoys back to Seville. They travel in fleets for protection, escorted by warships, their hulls bulging with treasure that could bankroll empires. But fleets are slow, clumsy, and predictable. Pirates and privateers before them circle like sharks. You stand on the edge of a coral reef, watching the sails on the horizon, knowing they are both the prize and the bait. One verified fact is simple and stark. The treasure from the Americas transformed Europe. The silver mines of Potosi in modern Bolivia produced so much that by the 17th century, Spanish coins were the closest thing the world had to a global currency. They flowed to China, fueling Ming trade, and to Europe, funding wars and palaces. But all that silver had to cross the sea, and the sea has no locks. Each shipment was a temptation too great for raiders to resist. The quirky detail is that sometimes storms did the pirates' work for them. Hurricanes wrecked treasure fleets with brutal efficiency. In 1715, a Spanish fleet carrying enormous wealth sank off Florida in a hurricane. Locals and later scavengers plundered the wrecks for years. And even today, divers find coins scattered in the sand like seashells. Imagine swimming through clear water and brushing your hand against a glimmering 8-real piece. A coin that once might have paid a king's ransom. But piracy is not only the work of storms. The Caribbean became infamous because of the traps set along its routes. Pirates knew where the galleons must pass. Through the Windward Passage, near Cuba, along the Bahamas. They hid in coves, behind reefs, in the shadows of islands, waiting for the slow, lumbering treasure ships. A pirate sloop, light and fast, could dart in, swarm a galleon, and vanish before escorts could react. It was a game of patience, nerve, and ruthless speed. Scholarly uncertainty lingers over just how successful pirates were against the treasure fleets. Some argue that despite the drama of raids, most Spanish silver still made it home. The fleets were cumbersome, but they were protected, and Spain's empire endured for centuries. Others suggest that the psychological impact of piracy was as devastating as the economic damage. Even if only a few ships were lost, the fear of loss haunted every voyage, raising costs, altering strategies, shaping history. Did pirates cripple Spain, or merely nip at its heels? The debate continues. Like the endless surf, you imagine standing on the deck of a Spanish galleon, its timbers groaning under treasure. The air is thick with the smell of gunpowder and sweat. The crew peers nervously at every island. Then, shouts, sails spotted, a fast ship bearing down. Grappling hooks fly, muskets crack, and suddenly the deck is a battlefield. Pirates swing aboard, knives flashing, eyes wild. In minutes, the treasure you guarded belongs to someone else. Perhaps you're thrown overboard, or perhaps, if lucky, taken captive to be ransomed. But pirates didn't just attack ships. Some struck directly at ports. In 1628, Dutch privateer Piet Hein captured the entire Spanish treasure fleet near Cuba, an astonishing coup that funneled millions into Dutch coffers. Others raided towns, In 1668, Henry Morgan sacked Portobello, storming its defenses with ladders cobbled together from ship masts. Imagine the chaos. Bells ringing, soldiers scrambling, civilians fleeing as Morgan's men poured through the gates, plundering churches and storehouses. And then there is the personal touch of the Caribbean pirates. They thrived on reputation as much as plunder. A captain with a fearsome name could make enemies surrender without a fight. A galleon crew that had heard tales of Blackbeard, of the slow matches burning in his beard, of his eyes gleaming through smoke, might throw down their weapons rather than risk his wrath. Piracy was psychological theater as much as combat. Still, life for pirates was not endless riches. Most plunder was quickly squandered in taverns. Rum flowed, dice rolled, brothels lit with laughter. Nassau, Tortuga, Port Royal, all became notorious havens where coins stolen at sword point disappeared in a single night of indulgence. For every tale of treasure, there were dozens of pirates who died broke, hanged, or lost at sea. The romance of buried treasure maps, the X marking the spot, belongs more to legend than reality. Pirates spent their loot fast. The sea never let them keep it long. Yet even here, amidst the chaos, you see patterns forming. Piracy disrupts empires, reshapes strategies, forces navies to evolve. The Spanish treasure routes, the lifeblood of a global empire, created an equally global shadow world of raiders. And in the Caribbean, these shadows grew bolder. For soon, you will find yourself in Nassau, in a tavern thick with smoke and laughter, where outlaw captains gather like kings of another world. The golden age of piracy is waiting just around the tide. The air thickens with rum and wood smoke, the laughter of rough voices spilling out of creaking taverns. You've arrived in Nassau, the capital of a kingdom that no king has ever ruled. The golden age of piracy. From roughly 1650 to 1730, the Caribbean and its surrounding seas become a stage where pirates strut with audacity, where names like Blackbeard, Calico Jack, Anne Bonny, and Bartholomew Roberts turn into whispered legends. You hear the shuffle of boots on sandy streets, the jingle of stolen coins, and the echo of fiddles playing in the night. Here, the line between survival and excess is thin as a knife's edge. The verified fact that anchors you is this: Nassau on New Providence Island became a pirate republic in the early 18th century. With the collapse of formal colonial authority, pirates seized the port and ruled it as their own. Ships came and went, laden with plunder. There were no taxes, no governors, only captains and their crews, men and sometimes women, who answered to their own code. Imagine a place where the law is what the loudest voices in the tavern decide, where flags of skull and crossbones wave not as rebellion but as invitation. Nassau is less a town and more a promise. Freedom, profit, and danger. And yet, the quirky detail that makes you smirk is this: pirates in Nassau elected their captains. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of European navies, pirate ships were often startlingly democratic. Crews voted on decisions, shared loot more equally than most armies, and could depose a captain who grew too cruel or cautious. In a strange twist, the outlaws of the sea practiced a form of liberty that many so-called civilized states denied their own people. Sit at a pirate council in Nassau, and you'd hear the clamor of sailors shouting, arguing, laughing, and finally voting. Their calloused hands raised in the glow of lantern light, but scholarly uncertainty clouds the romance. How much of this democracy was real? And how much has been exaggerated by later writers eager to paint pirates as proto-revolutionaries? Some historians argue the pirate code was less about liberty than practicality, a way to prevent mutiny and ensure discipline. Others point to surviving pirate articles, documents spelling out rules and loot distribution, as evidence that indeed, pirates practiced a kind of radical equality. The truth may lie somewhere in the middle. The codes were real, but life at sea was still brutal. A captain could lose his command, but a sailor could also lose a hand or an eye in the next raid. You close your eyes and hear the infamous names. Edward Teach, Blackbeard, looming tall with slow-burning matches woven into his beard, smoke curling around his head as if he were a demon risen from the deep. His flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, carried 40 guns, enough to terrify whole squadrons. Yet, he was more showman than butcher. Many accounts say he preferred to intimidate rather than kill, using reputation as his deadliest weapon. Imagine facing him across a deck, his beard ablaze with smoke, eyes gleaming, voice booming. Your courage would vanish before a single shot was fired. Then there's Calico Jack Rackham, remembered less for his own feats than for his companions. Anne Bonny and Mary Red, two women who cut through the myth of piracy as a men's world. Anne Bonny, fiery and fearless, reportedly fought with ferocity to the end, cursing the men who cowered while she and Mary defended their ship. Their presence unsettled enemies and allies alike. You can almost see them now. Clothes ragged from sea spray, pistols at their belts, blades glinting in the lantern light, their voices sharp with laughter as they gamble and drink with the rest. And Bartholomew Roberts, Black Bart, the most successful of them all, capturing over 400 ships in his career. Roberts was a paradox. Flamboyant, fond of fine clothes, yet also a strict disciplinarian who enforced order on his ships. He declared that a pirate captain's power came from consent, not birth. You picture him in crimson waistcoat and feathered hat, standing against the backdrop of endless sea, a figure both elegant and ruthless. The daily life of pirates, though, was not all battles and bravado. You lean on a rickety table in a Nassau tavern and hear the ordinary sounds. Sailors arguing over dice, fiddlers scraping tunes, tankards clinking. Pirates spent their fortunes quickly. Rum, women, clothes, gambling. The cycle was endless. Raid, plunder, squander, raid again. Few saved. Few grew old. The golden age was golden because it was brief, burning bright like a torch in the dark, then vanishing in smoke. Still, for a moment, pirates controlled the sea. They exploited the cracks in empire. Spain's weakened fleets, England's distracted governors, France's shifting alliances. They thrived in the gaps where law had not yet reached, where the ocean was still too vast to patrol. For ordinary sailors, piracy offered escape from the harsh discipline of naval service or merchant ships, where pay was meager and punishments cruel. Better to risk death as a pirate than to endure life as a half-starved sailor under a captain's lash. And you, wandering Nassau's sandy streets, feel the allure too. The sea breeze carries laughter and music, the promise of freedom, the thrill of risk. But in the distance, faintly, you also hear the sound of hammers and saws. Navies are building faster ships. Governments are tired of humiliation. The age of pirate republics cannot last forever. The nooses are being tied already. For now, though, in this fleeting window of history, you stand in the heart of the golden age. Blackbeard smokes on the horizon, Anne Bonny sharpens her blade, and Nassau itself roars with life. Tomorrow the hunt will come. But tonight, under the Caribbean stars, the pirates are kings. The tavern lights in Nassau fade behind you as you step out into the cooler night air, the stars bright over the Caribbean. The music of fiddles and the clink of mugs lingers faintly, but the hush of waves carries a different tune now. Whispers of maps, treasure chests, and secrets buried beneath sand. Tonight, you drift into the world of pirate myths, where the reality of stolen goods and squandered coin is dressed up in stories of buried treasure and parrots on shoulders. Here, fantasy entwines with fact so tightly that even scholars argue where one ends and the other begins. The confirmed truth is that most pirates did not bury treasure. The plunder of a raid was usually spent as quickly as possible in ports like Nassau or Port Royal. Rum, dice, and silk jackets ate away at fortunes faster than worms through old wood. But then there's the tale of Captain William Kidd, a Scottish privateer turned pirate, who in 1699 supposedly buried treasure on Gardiner's Island off the coast of Long Island. Some of that treasure was indeed found and used against him in court, sealing his fate. Kidd was hanged, and his body hung in chains by the Thames as a warning. But the myth of buried treasure stuck. If Kidd buried a hoard, why not others? Soon, legends sprouted of secret maps marked with an X, of islands hiding golden chests, of pirates too cunning to spend all their loot at once. The quirky detail that tickles your imagination is this. Some pirates did create makeshift maps, but often not for gold. Archaeologists have uncovered sketches where captains marked hidden water sources, safe harbors, or supply caches. A crude drawing on a scrap of canvas might show an island with a dotted trail, not leading to treasure, but to a spring where fresh water could be found. Over time, these practical sketches may have blurred into the idea of treasure maps, the kind a child today dreams of unfolding with trembling hands. Scholarly uncertainty wraps around this entire subject. Were treasure maps ever truly used to hide great fortunes? Or are they inventions of 19th century novelists? Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, published in 1883, gave the world its most enduring image of pirates digging holes in the sand while parrots screeched overhead. Before Stevenson, there is little evidence of such tales. Yet oral traditions are slippery. And who's to say no pirate ever tucked away a chest, hoping to return? The sea keeps secrets well. You picture a lonely island somewhere in the Bahamas. A crew drags ashore heavy chests, their backs bent, sweat dripping. The captain orders them to dig beneath the palms, perhaps muttering an oath or scratching a symbol onto a scrap of parchment. The chests are lowered in, covered with soil, marked with nothing more than a crooked tree. But storms, tides, and time erase landmarks. Perhaps the captain dies before he can return, and perhaps, centuries later, a fisherman finds a strange coin glinting in the surf, a whisper from the past. Beyond buried treasure, myths paint pirates with bright plumage. Parrots perched on shoulders appear again and again in stories. While parrots were indeed common pets in the Caribbean and Central America, there is little evidence they were a standard pirate accessory. Still, the image persists. You can almost hear the squawk. Pieces of eight, pieces of eight. And it makes you smile. Even as you know, it is more fantasy than fact. Other myths sprout like seaweed. The black flag with skull and crossbones, the Jolly Roger, was not universal, but pirates did fly fearsome banners. Some showed skeletons holding spears, bleeding hearts, or even hourglasses, symbols meant to terrify victims into surrendering without a fight. Reality was stranger and often darker than the simplified cartoon flags that flutter in modern memory. Then there are the tales of curses and ghosts. Sailors whispered that the spirits of dead captains haunted wrecks, guarding treasure with spectral fury. Ships lost in storms were said to sail again as phantom vessels, their lanterns glowing faintly across dark waters. Even today, stories of ghost ships, like the Flying Dutchman, owe something to the era when piracy made the sea a place of endless rumor. You walk slowly along the sand of this imagined shore, the myths swirling like mist. They matter not only because they are fanciful, but because they keep pirates alive long after the nooses tightened around their necks. The legends transform men who squandered their gold into immortals who always kept some hidden. They transform desperate sailors into romantic rebels who thumbed their noses at kings. The myths matter because they linger, yet as you turn back toward the sea, you feel the truth pressing at you again. Beneath every parrot and treasure chest lies a reality of hunger, fear, and fleeting wealth. Pirates lived hard, died young, and left behind more stories than coins. The myths, though, are part of their true treasure. They keep the memory alive. Centuries after the last cutlass clattered to the deck, the tide rises. You hear voices again, not of storytellers, but of pirates themselves, gathered in hidden coves, reciting their codes of conduct, their laws of the brotherhood. The myths are fading, and the reality of pirate law is waiting for you beyond the next wave. The night closes around you like a velvet sail, and the legends of buried treasure dissolve into something harder, more grounded, more human. You're standing now not on a beach littered with myth, but on the deck of a creaking brigantine at dawn. The sea is pale and still, gulls wheeling above. Around you, men stir awake, rolling from hammocks, grumbling, laughing, stretching limbs stiff from salt and sleep. This is not the world of kings or merchants, but of brotherhoods, loose, volatile, and somehow freer than any kingdom on land. Tonight, you drift into their coves, their codes, their secret republics. You begin in the same place the myths often do, with the pirate code. It wasn't a single document, but many, each drawn up by a ship's crew and agreed upon by oath. You can almost smell the ink, see the rough signatures, sometimes just X's, scrawled across the parchment. These articles dictated everything. How plunder would be divided, how injuries would be compensated, how disputes would be settled. On most ships, captains received 2 shares, quartermasters 1.5, and ordinary sailors 1. If you lost a limb, you might receive extra coin as compensation. It wasn't charity, it was equity of risk. For men who'd fled the tyranny of naval ships and merchant masters, this was revolutionary. The quirky detail is that some pirate codes even banned gambling at sea. You laugh softly, picturing a gang of rum-soaked cutthroats swearing solemnly not to play dice. But it made sense. Money lost to luck, rather than battle, could sow resentment, and resentment led to mutiny. Discipline among pirates was not the lash of a captain, but the balance of shared interest. If a captain abused his men or grew cowardly, he could be voted out. Democracy at the edge of the world. Scholars still debate how widespread these rules were. Were they ideals or realities? Surviving copies of codes, like those attributed to Bartholomew Roberts and Edward Lowe, suggest they were real enough. But how closely every crew followed them is uncertain. Still, they formed a kind of moral spine in a lawless ocean, proof that even thieves crave structure. The Brethren of the Coast, as they called themselves, lived by rules of their own making, rejecting those imposed from thrones and crowns. You follow the faint glow of lanterns toward shore. Hidden coves appear. Tortuga, Madagascar, the Bahamas. Each serves as a pirate haven, a small republic of outlaws where stolen goods are traded, ships repaired, and alliances forged. In Tortuga, French, English, and Dutch pirates gather together, languages mixing, knives flashing, rum flowing. In Madagascar's Île Sainte-Marie, ships from across the Indian Ocean drop anchor. Some say the pirates there built small villages, even families, carving out fragile utopias far from any empire's reach. You can almost see the smoke rising from cook fires, the laughter of men who finally found a shore where no one tells them what to do. But the idyll never lasts. Pirate havens depend on secrecy, and secrecy dies with success. The more treasure flows in, the more governors take notice. And yet, for a few years, they are free. They live without taxes, without kings, answering only to their captains and the sea. There is beauty in the chaos, a floating democracy of thieves, created not from ideals, but from necessity. You sit among them now, cross-legged on the deck, listening as the quartermaster reads out the code. The air smells of tar and tobacco. The men nod, some solemn, some grinning. They know the risks. Capture means hanging, sometimes by chains left to rot along harbor walls. But for now, this code binds them. No striking one another on board, it says. No stealing from the common stock. Every man to keep his arms clean and fit for service. Simple laws for survival. And here's another truth buried in the romantic haze. Pirate crews were often more diverse than any society of their time. Africans freed or escaped from slavery, indigenous Caribbean sailors, Europeans, Arabs, even Asians, all shared the deck. Race mattered less than loyalty. On a pirate ship, you were judged by courage, not color. That reality, uncomfortable and radical for the 17th century, has led some historians to call pirate society an accidental experiment in equality. For a brief moment, outlaws created what empires could not. A brotherhood beyond race and nation. But the sea, always hungry, takes back what it gives. You hear distant thunder. The coming storm is not of weather, but of navies. Britain, France, Spain, all send ships to purge the Caribbean. The pirate Republic of Nassau falls when Woodes Rogers, a former privateer himself, arrives as governor in 1718 with offers of pardon. "Surrender and live," he declares. Many do. Some, like Charles Vane, refuse and are hanged for it. The gallows replace the taverns. The codes are burned. By the mid-1720s, the brotherhood is broken. Still, you feel the afterglow of it. The idea that men once carved freedom out of waves and wind lingers like phosphorescence in the water. Their rules, their flags, their oaths, all become symbols later generations will misunderstand, romanticize, even admire. For a few decades, they built their own order, rough but real, and though it collapsed under cannon fire, its ghost still drifts between the tides. You look back at the horizon. Smoke rises faintly. Somewhere out there, another kind of ship waits. A hunter's ship, sleek and determined. The time of the pirates' rule is ending, and the time of their pursuit has begun. The hunted are about to become the haunted. The wind that once carried laughter through Nassau's taverns now carries something else. Orders barked in naval English, the crack of gunfire, and the heavy roll of drums. You're standing on a rocky shore somewhere near Jamaica in the 1720s, watching a new kind of ship cut across the horizon. Its hull is dark, its rigging perfect, its flag the Union Jack. No skulls, no crossbones, just authority made of oak and iron. The age of freedom on the waves is closing, and the age of the hunt has begun. The verified fact here is stark. By 1726, the so-called golden age of piracy had been largely crushed. The Royal Navy and its European counterparts, once indifferent or even complicit, began systematic campaigns to eradicate pirates. Between 1716 and 1726, over 1,000 pirates were captured and executed. Hanging Day became public ritual. Gallows rose in every major port. In London, Wapping's execution dock saw its share of bodies swaying on the tide. The message was clear. The sea now belonged to empire again. You imagine the scene. A captured pirate brought ashore, wrists bound, bare feet dragging through mud. The crowd jeers, yet some watch silently, uneasy. They know these men once sailed free, and part of them envies it. The noose drops, the body swings, and the gulls wheel above, mocking, indifferent. But there is a quirky twist in this grim chapter. Some pirates tried to talk their way out of death by claiming they'd already accepted the king's pardon, a real decree issued by King George I in 1717 and again in 1718, offering amnesty to any pirate who surrendered within a year. For a time, it worked. Dozens came forward, including the notorious Benjamin Hornigold, who not only took the pardon, but later hunted his former comrades on behalf of the crown. You can picture the awkward reunions at sea. A man who once drank with you now commands the ship sent to hang you. The scholarly uncertainty is this: why did piracy collapse so completely, so quickly? Was it the might of naval power, or had piracy burned itself out? Some historians argue that the Caribbean simply became too dangerous and too well governed. Others believe the economic shifts, the end of major wars, the decline of privateering, left sailors unemployed, and when they failed to find steady work as pirates, the trade died. Perhaps, as always, it was a little of both. You step aboard a man of war now, part of a convoy patrolling the Atlantic. The deck is polished, the crew drilled to perfection. Every cannon is loaded, every rope coiled neatly. The captain's word is law. No voting here, no freedom. Compared to the chaotic equality of a pirate sloop, this ship feels like a prison of discipline. Yet it wins battles, and that is what matters to kings. When a pirate ship is spotted, the chase begins. Naval gunners know that pirates rely on speed, so they aim to cripple the masts first. A lucky shot shatters the rigging, and the pirate vessel slows. Grappling lines fly, musket volleys crack, and in minutes, the Jolly Roger flutters down. Survivors are bound and thrown into the hold, bound for trial, but not all pirates go quietly. You recall Bartholomew Roberts, Black Bart, perhaps the last great captain of the Golden Age. In 1722, off the coast of Africa, Roberts is killed in a battle with HMS Swallow. His crew, respecting his wish never to be captured, throws his body overboard wrapped in his red silk coat. The sea takes him, as it took so many others. With his death, historians often mark the symbolic end of the pirate era. Still, fragments of rebellion linger. In the Indian Ocean, a few rogue ships continue to raid. In the South China Sea, local corsairs thrive in the gray space between merchant and pirate. Yet the global tide has turned. Insurance companies, naval treaties, and colonial bureaucracies weave a web of control stronger than any rope. The oceans are no longer wild. They're mapped, taxed, and charted. There's an odd poetry in how pirates meet their end. When hanged, some delivered final speeches recorded by pamphlet writers eager for sensation. One condemned man at execution dock reportedly declared, "I die a martyr to liberty." The crowd jeered, but the phrase hung in the air. A martyr to liberty. Imagine that, from a man whose liberty came at the point of a cutlass. Yet the idea stuck. You feel the atmosphere of those public executions. The smell of tar and rope, the river slapping against the pier, the uneasy cheer of citizens who half admire the doomed. After the bodies are cut down, they are often coated in pitch and hung in iron cages along the Thames or in coastal inlets, a grim warning to others. Sailors passing by tip their hats or spit to ward off bad luck. Superstition grows from fear, and fear feeds the legend. By the mid-18th century, the term pirate itself changes. No longer a common occupation, it becomes a symbol, a whisper of defiance. Songs and ballads romanticize what law has erased. Children play at pirates. Playwrights use them as metaphors for freedom and folly. You can almost hear the slow transformation happening. Criminals turning into characters. The noose has done its work, but the stories live on, and in those stories, the hunted become eternal. The next chapter of their legacy will not be written on the sea, but on the page and stage. Fiction reshaping memory. History softening into myth. But before you follow that echo, stand here a moment longer. The sea is calm again, the gallows empty, but you can still feel the ghosts of the hunted whispering through the rigging. They were thieves, killers, opportunists, and dreamers of a kind. They chased wealth, yes, but also something rarer, a moment of absolute freedom. And though the Empire wins, it never truly kills that dream. The map spreads wider again under your hands. You've drifted east, out of the Atlantic lanes and around the shoulder of the world, into the teeming harbors of Asia. The waters are different here, thick with trade, busy with junks and sampans, edged by cities that smell of incense and fish oil and tea. The pirates who rule these seas have nothing to do with the rum-soaked figures of Nassau. Their flags are red silk, their fleets measured not in handfuls of ships, but in hundreds. You have come into the domain of the Eastern pirates, where power and rebellion fuse into something almost imperial. The verified fact is astonishing in its scale. By the early 1800s, one woman, Qing Shi, widow of the pirate Zheng Yi, commanded a confederation of more than 1,000 ships and an estimated 60,000 sailors. Her fleets patrolled the South China Sea, extracting tribute from merchants, fishermen, and even provincial governors. Western chroniclers later called it the Red Flag Fleet. You stand on the deck of one of those junks now, feeling the bamboo deck flex beneath your feet as rows of oars dip in rhythm. The sails billow scarlet, blotting out the sun. This is piracy transformed into industry. The quirky detail that makes you pause. Qing Shi enforced a code so strict it rivaled any admiral's. Theft from the common loot meant death. Rape of captives meant death. Desertion, death. But marriage between pirates, strangely, was permitted. And once a union was recognized, the woman was protected by the entire fleet. In this floating kingdom, justice was absolute and bizarrely progressive. You imagine her sitting in her cabin, the sea wind pressing the silk curtains as she listens to petitions from lieutenants like an empress holding court. Scholars still debate how she built such power. Some credit her husband's legacy. Others point to alliances with coastal officials eager to share profits. Perhaps it was simply that she understood what every pirate before her only half grasped. That organization, not chaos, makes terror last. Under her, piracy became bureaucracy. Ledgers, flags of rank, patrol zones, even supply chains for food and gunpowder. The South China Sea was her map, divided neatly into provinces of plunder. You trace her routes in your mind. From the Pearl River Delta down to Vietnam, across to Hainan, out toward the Philippines. Fishing boats paid her tax. Merchant convoys bought safe passage. Those who refused were swallowed whole. For coastal villages, the horizon itself became an omen. Smoke on the water meant the red flags were coming. The Qing dynasty tried to destroy her again and again. Fleets were sent, forts built. But the Chinese navy of the early 19th century was corrupt, underfunded, outmatched. Imagine an admiral's frustration. Each time he sailed, the pirates vanished into coves and estuaries, only to strike somewhere else. At one point, the Empire even hired Portuguese warships from Macau to assist, and still she held firm. For 2 years, the Red Flag Fleet ruled unchallenged. There's another smaller, human detail. almost tender. Qing Shi traveled with an adopted son who became her lieutenant, and later, her husband. Western writers moralized. Chinese chroniclers skirted the topic. But what mattered was loyalty. Together, they negotiated the most improbable surrender in pirate history. In 1810, seeing the empire arrayed against her, Qing Shi marched into the governor's palace in Canton. Not as a prisoner, but as a negotiator. She offered peace in exchange for amnesty. To the shock of all, the Qing accepted. Thousands of her followers laid down arms and were pardoned. Many even enlisted in the Imperial Navy. Qing Shi herself kept her fortune and retired comfortably, dying decades later as a respected businesswoman. No rope, no gallows, no anonymous grave, just quiet wealth and old age. She may be the only pirate in history to win, yet the sea never stays calm. After her, other fleets rose: the Cantonese pirates, the Malay Lanun of the Sunda Strait, the Bugis of the Celebes. Each culture produced its own seaborne predators. In Southeast Asia, piracy was entwined with trade and politics. Local rulers both fought and hired them. A British merchant sailing from Penang to Borneo might be escorted by one group of pirates to avoid another. In these waters, morality bent like bamboo. And then comes the scholarly uncertainty that lulls you into thought. Were these truly pirates in the Western sense? Or were they simply maritime powers outside imperial paperwork? European empires called them outlaws because they interfered with colonial trade. But local history sometimes described them as heroes resisting foreign control. To the villagers along the Straits of Malacca, a Malay sea lord who taxed Dutch ships might not be a criminal at all. He was a defender of local sovereignty. Words like pirate or privateer depended, as always, on who wrote the report. You walk the docks of Canton in the aftermath of Qing Shi's surrender. The smell of tar and tea hangs in the air. Official banners proclaim peace on the seas, yet whispers persist of smaller bands still striking at night. A merchant pours tea and mutters, "There are always more." You look out to where the Pearl River widens into the sea, remembering the scarlet sails that once filled the horizon. They're gone, but their wake remains. A reminder that the East, too, had its empires of thieves, its queens of rebellion, its codes carved not in parchment, but in tide and blood. Beyond the South China Sea, the world is changing again. Steamships will soon replace sails. Empires will stretch telegraph cables across oceans. But even as technology tightens its grip, the old hunger stirs elsewhere. New coasts, new opportunities, new forms of piracy. You feel the compass pull you forward once more, toward an age when pirates no longer command fleets, but still command imaginations. Toward a time when stories of the sea become currency of their own, when romance and reality start to blur forever. The water beneath you changes color again, from the jade hues of the South China Sea to the darker, deeper blue of imagination. The cannons quiet, the rigging creaks softer, and the violence of centuries begins to fade into memory. You're sailing now through the fog that separates fact from fiction, a strange current where every pirate who ever lived is reborn. Not as they were, but as the world wants them to be. This is the sea of stories, where the romance of piracy begins. The verified fact is that after the 18th century, piracy never again reached the scale or glory of its so-called golden age. The last major executions were done, the oceans patrolled, the empires secure. But the imagination of those empires, especially Britain's, refused to let go of the pirate myth. In the quiet drawing rooms of London, long after the last hangings at Wapping, pamphlets and ballads kept the legends alive. The Ballad of Captain Ward, The Bold Princess Royal, Henry Martin, songs of men who defied kings and died laughing. Their melodies lingered in taverns and harbors, transforming criminals into folk heroes. The quirky detail that makes you smile is that some of those songs were written by the same sailors who once hunted pirates. The Royal Navy, ever fond of a tune, sang their enemies' praises on long voyages. They despised the pirate's chaos, yet envied his freedom. Picture it: a group of British seamen hauling ropes at dawn, humming the ballad of Captain Kidd beneath their breath. Even the hunters were haunted by the hunted. But the scholarly uncertainty is the heart of this era. Did the romantic image of pirates evolve naturally through nostalgia? Or was it constructed deliberately as a way for empires to sanitize their own violent maritime history? Some historians argue that by painting pirates as colorful rogues instead of desperate outlaws, colonial powers could hide the fact that their own navies had committed similar crimes under royal sanction. The pirate became a mirror, reflecting everything society both desired and denied. Freedom, greed, defiance, cruelty, all polished into story. You wander into a London bookshop around 1720, long before Stevenson or Hollywood. On the shelves are thin chapbooks filled with confessions, half real, half invented, of captured pirates. The publishers learned quickly. Nothing sold like sin. They published last words, letters from the gallows, lurid accounts of battles and betrayals. Readers devoured them. For the first time, piracy turned profitable not through loot, but through literature. A century later, the tide of myth rises again. The 1800s give you the image that endures to this day. The parrot, the peg leg, the buried treasure, the map with an X. Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, 1883, distills every rumor, ballad, and folktale into one intoxicating brew. Long John Silver becomes the archetype of the charming rogue. Dangerous, but magnetic. You can almost hear him laughing across the pages. Yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum. The book rewrites history, and in doing so, it gives pirates a kind of immortality no gallows could erase. Yet, beneath the story, faint truths survive. Stevenson based parts of Silver on real figures. Men like Bartholomew Roberts or the enigmatic Captain Johnson, author of A General History of the Pirates, 1724. That book, though anonymous, remains one of the most influential works ever printed about piracy. Some scholars think that Captain Johnson, who wrote it, was actually Daniel Defoe, the author of Robinson Crusoe. Whoever he was, he turned real blood into legend, shaping nearly every pirate stereotype that followed. You turn the brittle pages of that book now in your imagination. The ink smells faintly of salt and dust. Inside are stories of daring escapes, secret islands, ships christened with ominous names, adventure galley, royal fortune, fancy. But the author's voice is almost tender. He calls pirates men of misfortune, describing their courage and despair in equal measure. His pirates weep, joke, pray, curse. They are human, and that humanity ensures their survival in memory. Meanwhile, on stage and screen, the myth evolves again. By the 19th century, theaters across Europe produced melodramas about pirates with tragic hearts. In the 20th century, film gives them color and motion. Errol Flynn swings from rigging. Douglas Fairbanks grins beneath a feathered hat. Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean adds ghosts and humor, transforming cruelty into spectacle. The black flag flutters endlessly, now not as a threat, but as entertainment. You sip rum in a quiet tavern somewhere in your mind, and listen as an old storyteller begins another tale. The people lean closer, eyes shining. He tells of cursed gold, of a pirate who buried his soul inside a chest, of a woman captain who vanished into mist. The story loops endlessly, changing with every telling, as alive as the sea itself. You realize slowly that stories have become the new ocean, boundless, irresistible, and filled with unseen currents. Yet something deeper stirs beneath the romance. The enduring idea of freedom. It's why the pirate still glimmers in imagination long after his corpse rotted in the noose. He, or she, represents the refusal to kneel, the urge to chart one's own course even when it leads to ruin. In every age, people rewrite the pirate myth to fit their own desires. Revolutionaries see rebellion, artists see independence, corporations sell adventure. The skull and crossbones becomes not a warning, but a logo, plastered on t-shirts and rum bottles, drained of fear but not of fascination. And here, at the edge of the modern world, you sense that the myth has circled back on itself. The pirates are ghosts, yes, but they haunt us sweetly. We keep them alive in our songs, our Halloween costumes, our video games and theme parks. We no longer fear their cutlasses, but we still chase their horizon. Because somewhere inside us always that small, dangerous whisper. What if I could live by no one's rules but my own? The fog thickens, stories blending into silence. You feel the keel turn once more beneath your feet. Ahead lies the present, the age of engines, satellites, and speedboats. The sails are gone, but the hunger remains. The next wave of pirates is already here, hiding not in coves, but behind radar screens and cargo manifests. The sails fall away for good now. The masts shrink into memory, and the air fills with the lower hum of diesel engines. You've drifted into the modern era, where the sea is mapped, the shipping lanes numbered, and the pirates who haunt them carry radios instead of cutlasses. Their flags are no longer skulls, but corporate logos painted over in salt and rust. And yet, in the rhythm of the waves, you feel something familiar. A hunger that never died. The verified fact that grounds you is this: piracy never vanished. It only evolved. In 2008, at the height of the Somali crisis, more than 200 ships were attacked in the waters off the Horn of Africa. Tankers, freighters, fishing trawlers, nothing was sacred. The pirates no longer sought gold or spices, but ransoms. Millions wired through international banks. The global economy itself had become their sea. You picture it now. A container ship the length of a city block, crawling across the Gulf of Aden, its lights a chain of floating stars. Out of the darkness come skiffs, narrow, fast, powered by cheap outboard motors. The men aboard wear flip-flops, carry AK-47s, and shout in a mix of Somali, Arabic, and English. They climb steel hulls with ladders made from rope and tire rubber. In minutes, the bridge is theirs. The quirky detail that surprises you is that many of these modern pirates begin as fishermen. When illegal industrial fleets from Europe and Asia strip Somali waters of tuna and snapper, the locals lose their livelihood. At first, they board foreign vessels to demand taxes. Later, those taxes become ransoms. What starts as coastal protection mutates into organized crime. Some of the earliest pirate leaders call themselves Coast Guards of Somalia. It's a strange echo of older centuries. Corsairs claiming to defend faith, privateers claiming to defend crown. The justification changes, but the pattern repeats. Scholars still argue over how to label this new piracy. Is it terrorism, organized crime, or a symptom of failed governance? Some economists frame it as a desperate adaptation. People in a collapsed state exploiting the one resource still within reach: the sea. Others remind us that many hostage negotiators and middlemen in these deals operate far from Africa, in glass towers in Dubai or London. Piracy in the 21st century is not just a man with a gun on a skiff. It is also the network of lawyers, insurers, and financiers who profit from his threat. You sit on the deck of a captured tanker now, listening to the hum of the engines beneath your feet. The crew, Filipino, Ukrainian, Indian, huddle together under tarps, guarded but unharmed. Their captors cook rice over portable stoves, pray at dawn, watch the horizon. They're waiting for negotiations to end, for someone, somewhere, to pay. The sea stretches around them, flat and indifferent. It's the same indifferent sea that swallowed galleons and junks centuries ago. Technology has changed, but not fate. Outside Somalia, the problem spreads. In the Strait of Malacca, between Malaysia and Indonesia, ships still vanish in the night. Pirates there work with military precision, guided by GPS and insider information from port officials. Sometimes they hijack an entire vessel, repaint its hull and give it a new name before selling its cargo. It's called phantom shipping, a crime so sophisticated it makes Blackbeard look quaint. The world's navies chase them with radar and drones. But the waters are too many, the incentives too strong, and the irony deepens. As technology advances, so does the theater. Modern pirates rarely fire their weapons. A few warning shots are enough. The real war happens in insurance firms, courtrooms, and press releases. You read headlines calling them modern buccaneers, though few of them would use that word. They are contractors of chaos, professionals of desperation, yet when the cameras find them, they still smile. Lean men in sunglasses, laughing at the absurdity of taking on the world's richest nations with little more than courage and gasoline. Still, not all modern piracy hides in failed states. You look east to the South China Sea again, where tiny islands bristle with naval bases and trade routes cross like spider webs. Cargo ships carry billions in electronics and oil every day. Small bands of armed men strike and vanish among those islands, using the same trick as the Wokou and Qingshi centuries before. Local knowledge, political ambiguity, and sheer nerve. Southeast Asian governments respond with joint patrols, but the coastline is endless. The same geography that once made these seas rich in trade still makes them impossible to police. Even farther out, a different kind of piracy blooms, digital rather than physical. Pirate Bay, torrenting, data piracy. The words are borrowed from the sea. You smile at the metaphor. The oceans may be mapped, but cyberspace is a new frontier, its hackers playing out the same dance of theft, law, and rebellion in electric form. A millennium after the Sea Peoples, we still imagine rebellion through waves. Only now, the waves are invisible. And here's a final uncertainty, one that belongs to every historian who ever writes about pirates. Are they villains or victims? Every era finds its answer, shaped by its own conscience. The Romans saw them as a plague. The Enlightenment saw them as fools. The Romantics saw them as free spirits. Modern analysts see them as economic symptoms. Maybe all are true. Maybe piracy is simply the oldest mirror the sea holds up to civilization. A reflection of the hunger and inequality that never really end. You lean on the rail of a cargo ship gliding through the Indian Ocean at dusk. The sea looks empty, but you know better. Somewhere out there, engines idle, waiting. Yet you feel no fear now, only a quiet understanding. The pirates of today are not ghosts of the past. They are its descendants. Proof that the sea, despite satellites and sonar, remains a place where rules slip away. The sun sinks, turning the water molten gold. You close your eyes and think of the first raiders who paddled reed boats along Bronze Age shores. They too chased opportunity across the waves, driven by hunger and courage. The world has changed beyond recognition. And yet, not at all. The ship's horn sounds long and low. The engines hum you into stillness. The story is almost done, but not quite. There is one more wake to follow, one last lesson the sea will whisper before it sleeps. You can feel the long swell beneath the ship now. Not the sharp slap of waves in shallow harbors, but the slow breathing rhythm of deep water. The centuries have unspooled, and you've followed piracy from reed boats to radar screens. The night is enormous. Stars scatter like spilled silver. It's here, somewhere between silence and motion, that you begin to sense the wake they left. The long, invisible trail that never fades. The verified fact is that piracy, though ancient, has shaped much of the world's law and trade. The first international treaties on maritime law, what we call the Law of Nations, were written not to regulate explorers or merchants, but to punish pirates. They were the first criminals deemed hostis humani generis, enemies of all mankind. That phrase, carved into legal codes from the 17th century onward, still echoes in modern courtrooms, even in the 21st century. Captured Somali pirates are tried under those same words. Thousands of years have passed since the Sea Peoples, and yet the law still defines the pirate not as a citizen of anywhere, but as an outlaw everywhere. The quirky detail you find yourself smiling at is this. Despite all the effort to erase them, pirates are now among the best-known figures of world history. There are more films, books, and songs about pirates than about most kings or emperors. They've been used to sell breakfast cereal, to teach children the alphabet, to decorate theme parks. Pirate has become a costume, a festival, a joke we share across generations. If Blackbeard or Ching Shi could walk through a modern port today, they'd find their faces on mugs and movie posters. Their flags, once the signal of death, are now printed on beach towels. History has a sense of humor, but here's the scholarly uncertainty that never quite settles. Why do we keep them? Why does the pirate endure when so many conquerors are forgotten? Historians and psychologists both circle the question. Some say the answer lies in the dream of freedom, the pirate as the ultimate outsider, beholden to no master. Others say it's the morality play, pirates as the dark mirror of greed, reminding us what we become when law and hunger collide. Maybe it's simply that we need them. Every age invents its pirate to test its own conscience. You stand at the ship's bow, watching moonlight stretch a silver road across the sea. In that glow, the ghosts gather. The sea peoples of Egypt with their feathered helmets, the Cilicians who captured Caesar, the longships of the Vikings slicing through mist, the Wokou raiders drumming off the Chinese coast, the Barbary corsairs shouting beneath the crescent moon, Drake and Morgan, Blackbeard and Bonnie, Ching Shi and her scarlet sails. They pass one by one, not as villains or heroes, but as echoes of the same defiance. The sea remembers them all. You close your eyes and imagine the sound each age made. The scrape of oars, the thunder of cannon, the metallic clatter of chains, the buzz of an engine. Different instruments, same rhythm. Even the modern world still hums to it. Cyber pirates, data thieves, smugglers of ivory and refugees, all move through hidden currents where law cannot reach. They are not gone. They have only changed names. The ocean remains their oldest ally, vast enough to hide them, deep enough to forgive them. The irony, soft and steady as a tide, is that civilization itself needs them. Without piracy, empires would never have built their navies. Without corsairs, trade routes would not have been fortified. Every outlaw forced a ruler to grow stronger. Every raid sharpened the tools of governance. In trying to destroy piracy, humanity learned how to rule the sea. The pirate is civilization's secret partner, its shadow twin. You realize that now. The same hunger for freedom that drives a man to plunder also drives him to explore. The line between Magellan and Blackbeard, between commerce and conquest, is thinner than we care to admit. You walk along the deck as the sky lightens. The horizon is bleeding from black to blue, the faintest line of dawn appearing. The crew stirs, though you are alone. The sea whispers around the hull, centuries of stories collapsing into one long breath. You think of how each era cursed its pirates, hunted them, hanged them, and then retold their stories by firelight. Maybe that's how history forgives itself, by turning terror into legend. You sit finally near the rail. The ship hums. The air smells of salt and iron. The waves below are smooth as folded silk. In this quiet, you begin to hear what all those centuries were really saying. Not just greed or rebellion, but something smaller and older. The human urge to test the horizon. Every pirate, for all their cruelty, looked at the same line you're staring at now and thought, there's more out there. I'll take it. The difference between a merchant, a soldier, and a thief was often just who claimed the reward afterward. Empires forget that, but the ocean never does. The gulls cry faintly. The light strengthens. The ship glides onward, leaving only ripples, like the faint, fading trails of memory themselves. You realize softly that you've reached the end of the wake. The world is quieter now, but the water still moves. The stories still drift. And somewhere far away, a child hums a sea shanty, tracing an imaginary X on a map. The legacy continues, not in violence, but in wonder. You lean on the rail one last time and whisper into the wind, knowing it will carry your words across every age that ever touched the sea. The pirates are gone, but the sea is still theirs. The hum of the engine slows. The ship rocks gently. The sun slips higher, spilling warmth over the deck. You take a slow breath and feel the weight of centuries finally ease. All the battles, the storms, the legends, they've drifted out beyond reach now, dissolving into the same bright horizon they once chased. So let it all fade, softly. The creak of ropes, the scent of brine, the faint echo of laughter from a tavern long vanished. Let it go the way all tides go, outward, quietly, without regret. History is never still. It just rests between waves. You've sailed far enough for one night. Now, close your eyes. The sea is calm. The air is warm. Somewhere beyond the stars, the last of the pirate songs fades into sleep. Sweet dreams, sailor. The ocean will keep its secrets until morning.